Thanks, Bruno, for that introduction. It's true, all of it. It's an honor to be speaking here today. I'm really glad you are here. Today, I'll be speaking to you about assumptions in products, and especially about better products. I would like to start with getting some definitions straight. Then I'll talk about how I became a design researcher, some of the types of design research methods that I use, and what to do when you have barely any budget or no budget at all. Great. Well, now that we know what we'll be talking about, let's start with getting those definitions straight. You may have seen there are very different titles for the job that I do. You could call me a UX researcher, a user specialist, and I even like to mix those up myself. As you may have seen on the website before this event, we have UX research, design researcher, user researcher. There are many terms to describe me, but now let's stick with design researcher. For me, design research is all about aligning the user needs and the context with the software that the user is seeing, to make the software nice to use, to make it usable, to make it human even. Humanizing digital interactions, that's my purpose. It's also the purpose of the company that I'm working at, Valsplat. That's a nice coincidence. But now that we have those definitions straight about user research and design researchers, let me tell you a little bit about how I became a design researcher. About 20 years ago, when I started using computers, we had a very old German computer at my home. And back then, the main way of portable storage was these big floppy disks. You may have used them yourself. And they come in different sizes. And of course, I managed to make the wrong combination. So when I was young, Sunday or Friday, something like that, I put the small floppy in the big drive. Yeah, I screwed up. And I made sure that my dad had the entire weekend for himself to pick apart that floppy drive and to get that disk back out of there so we could use that computer again. It was the only computer we had then. And I screwed up, but I was also fascinated with my screw-up, because how could this be usable? Fast forward a few years, I had my own computer, stuff like this on the screen. How do you make this usable? And I screwed up with this interface quite a few times as well. There are so many buttons to choose from. How do you know what button to press? I had no idea. And for me, the moment that I knew what I wanted to be came in a guest lecture. Fast forward another couple of years. And there was a guest lecture from, well, he's now a colleague of mine, actually, from Stein. And he told about his job being working on websites to make sure if that's something you could use. So that definitely rang a bell with me. And I instantly knew what I was going to be. So I knew what I wanted to be, and I did some other jobs. I went from this college to choosing some cognition to get to know how people work, because I wanted to know, why do you make these mistakes and how do you do this? And when I was finished studying, I did my thesis. I did some design work first, because you can try to fix the errors, but maybe you need to make some of those yourself first. So I did some design work for 2 years, and then I got into the design research function that I'm now. And there's really a lot of ways to do this type of research, and I'd like to briefly discuss some of those with you today. Say you're organizing a conference, not too different from this one, and you want to sell tickets for this conference because you want people to show up. Obviously, you did. Good job. Kind of depends on the website, though. And in this case, things went pretty well, I guess. But there are many ways to look at how good your website or your digital product of any kind is doing. And that's UX research or design research we spoke about earlier. And you can either look for attitudes, how people feel about something, or how they behave. And you can find inspiration to look for new problems, and you can do research to check if the solution for the problem that you found is actually a proper solution. So you can categorize them in these squares. Let's say you're building the website for this conference. Talking to some conference goers might be a good place to start, just to see what they do, see what they feel like, what are their preferences. And just talking to any one of you here might be a very good place to start, to do some research on a conference website for a conference like this. You could just go talk to them. You can also ask for phone numbers and ask questions for people to keep a diary on how they are living up to a conference, how they are choosing a conference, and how they are doing it on the day itself. Where are the toilets? When are breaks? What's the next speaker? You can ask questions through WhatsApp. You can ask them to a lot of people. And this way you can get to know what the world is of a conference visitor, so you can make a better website for the conference. Well, there's a very nice website over here. You bought tickets, I assume most of you. And that's a very nice place to start doing some user testing, perhaps. You don't even have to be as far as this. You can ask people, go buy a ticket. This is a very nice conference. A friend told you this was a good conference and you want to buy a ticket. Go ahead. And you can test if this is a nice website. It's called user testing, but you're not testing the user. It's a really dumb term. Should have been called website testing, I guess. That would be a nice way to start user testing. You could do it in a setting like this. This is at Valsplat. You sit in a room with people you invite over and you offer them a task, and then you can look how they are doing to see what their interpretations are of the website. And there's a whole crew in another room looking at that same talk to see how things are going, make notes, and maybe ask for some more questions to be posed in the next interview. We usually do about 6 of these in a day. That's really a lot because these types of conversations are really hard to do. But at least you're talking to your users, and that's a big plus. And I didn't do any user testing for this website, but I did notice some fine print. This is the ticket selling point, and there's some fine print right here. Who of you noticed this fine print? I see a few hands, but not all too many. There was something about the mail delivery in this case. When you wanted to buy a ticket, you get a mail, but it might not always go this well. And this is especially a point where user testing would give you this problem, because the mail wouldn't be seen, and then people are stuck, and they start calling, and that takes time, takes people to answer the phone. So you don't really want that. But of course, I do realize that in this case, it's usually a third-party ticketing system, and it's very hard to make changes to a system that you've already implemented that's not really your own. So that might be very difficult. This might be the story behind this little fine print, but I'd like to hear from the organization what the real story was. Close? Great. So that's user testing. But you can also stay away from the users if that's more your thing. That's okay. Talking to people can be really hard. I know, because I'm talking to a lot of people right now. But you have analytics, you have A/B testing. And although you cannot really say why people are doing things, you will be able to see what a lot of people are doing. So, for instance, this was from a web shop that I researched a while ago. This is from Google Analytics, and you can see here that there are people in all sessions. Some are viewing products, but not all. And although this wasn't really implemented correctly, you can see that in the upper right corner, there are tons of people going into the checkout, but then there are also tons of people dropping out. This is costing you major money, probably, because all these people are leaving. Yeah, you're not really sure if these people would actually want to buy a ticket. But this is a great place to go back to user testing to see if there's a problem in the form, maybe there's a technical issue, email delivery, for instance. So even if you're not directly talking to your users, this is a great place to start to see if there are any big problems. This is another part of Google Analytics where you can see stuff that users do. This is from a different website, and this is a navigation summary. So for all people going to the home page, you can see that about 50% of the people are going to a page called Facilities and Services. Maybe this is something that should be on the home page. Maybe this is just a very big button or the only button on the home page. I'm not quite sure. But this warrants further investigation. And you didn't even have to talk to any people. You just put a snippet on the website and you get information like this. You can also see quite a lot of people going to pricing. It's probably all the Dutch. But there are tons of ways to do research. You can do focus groups to find opinions from more people. You can do card sorting to see how people expect the navigation to be. For instance, in a conference, you want to know stuff about the program, about the speakers, about the venue. And all of these tiny bits of information can be arranged in tons of ways. But there's probably a few ways that are way better than stupid ways. And you can ask people, okay, I have a bunch of cards, all tiny bits of information. Could you make an arrangement that makes sense to you? And although the proper solution might not be exactly in the results of that session, this will give you an insight in how people are thinking about a conference day. Also information that you might have gathered from just talking to people, but this is an easier way. Of course, all of this takes time, and it can be very hard to do it in the right way. That's why this is a job for me. But if you have your own product, just talking to your users and getting to know what their world is about will make you make a better product. It'll give you plenty of insights in their worries, in their fears. Maybe they have doubts about what kind of ticket they are buying on the conference page. There's really a lot of stuff that could go wrong, but at least you'll know in this way. So that's what you could do with almost no budget. You can just talk to users, but if I have to tell you one thing, it would be to buy this book, really. I didn't write it. The book's been there for a while. I read it in my studies. This book tells you about how you could get to know your users and how you can find some usability problems in a very low fidelity way, in a very low cost way. So to summarize, just go talk to your users. See what their world is about, and try to understand the problems that they are trying to solve. Or maybe just invite someone over, give them a task, and see if you can watch their behavior. That'll give you better products. Thank you.